This episode is a special episode. It's special in a couple of regards. First, I don't speak much. I have some videos I want to show you, and those videos are where other people are speaking, so not me. Second, I'm not going to tell you what is coming up because I want to see if anything in it is surprising for you. I want to see if surprising you with some content might bring some of your preconceptions about certain things to the fore. Now, this is always a bit risky because it assumes that you have those preconceptions that I think you have, and there's every chance that you don't. So in the content of this presentation, if it doesn't at any stage surprise you, be patient with it because it might surprise one of your classmates, and it's that surprise or that jarring of assumptions that might help spark some class time discussion. So let's have a look at our first video. This is a TED Talk given by Matthew Williams. He's an accomplished Canadian Olympic athlete. He's quite a handsome fellow, but what is his IQ? Can you guess? Is this guy not only a world-class athlete, but is he also super brainy? Now, jocks have a reputation of being athletically great but academically poor or mediocre. What I want you to do is watch this video and then see if after you have watched it you want to know his IQ. Psychology certainly wants to know his IQ, but do you? See if something happens to your view of intelligence testing during or after this video. And this video lasts for just around about 15 minutes.
Hello, my name is Matthew Williams, and I am a champion. I have won medals in 3 different sports at national games in Canada, competed at the international level in basketball, and was proud to represent Canada on the world stage. I train 5 days a week for basketball and speed skating, work with top quality coaches and mental performance consultants to be at my best in my sport. By the way, all that is through Special Olympics. Does that change the way you think of me and my accomplishments? The world does not see all people like me as champions. Not long ago, people like me were shunned and hidden away. There has been lots of change since Special Olympics began in 1968, but in too many cases, people with intellectual disabilities are invisible to the wider population. People use the R word in front of me, and they think it doesn't matter. That's the word retard or retarded used in a derogatory manner. They're not thinking about how much it hurts me and my friends. I don't want you to think I'm here because I'm a charity case. I am here because there's still a big problem with the way many people see individuals with intellectual disabilities, or too often, how they don't see them at all. Did you know the World Games happened this year? I was one of over 6,500 athletes with intellectual disabilities from 165 countries who competed in LA. There was over 62,000 spectators watching opening ceremonies, and there was live coverage on TSN and ESPN. Did you even know that happened? What do you think of when you see someone like me? I am here today to challenge you to look at us as equals. Special Olympics transforms the self-identity of athletes with intellectual disabilities and the perceptions of everyone watching. For those of you who aren't familiar, Special Olympics is for athletes with intellectual disabilities. Special Olympics is separate from the Paralympics and Olympics. We offer high-quality, year-round sports programs for people with intellectual disabilities that changes lives and perceptions. This movement has changed my life and those of so many others, and it has changed the way the world sees people with intellectual disabilities. I was born with epilepsy and an intellectual disability. Growing up, I played hockey until I was 12 years old. The older I got, the more I felt it was harder to keep up with everyone else, and I was angry and frustrated. For a while, I did not play any sports, didn't have many friends, and felt left out and sad. There was a time when people with intellectual disabilities were hidden away from society. No one thought they could participate in sports, let alone be a valued member of society. In the 1960s, Dr. Frank Hayden, a scientist at the University of Toronto, was studying the effects of regular exercise on the fitness levels of children with intellectual disabilities. Using rigorous scientific research, Dr. Hayden and other researchers came to the conclusion that it was simply the lack of opportunity to participate that caused their fitness levels to suffer. Lots of people doubted that people with intellectual disabilities could benefit from fitness programs and sports competition opportunities. But pioneers like Dr. Hayden and Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the founder of Special Olympics, persevered, and Special Olympic athletes have proved them right 4.5 million times over. Before I joined Special Olympics, I was nervous because I was young, shy, not confident, and didn't have many friends. When I got there, though, everyone was very encouraging, supportive, and let me be myself without being judged. Now, I am a basketball player and speed skater who has competed at provincial, national games, and this year made it all the way to the World Summer Games in LA, where I was part of the first ever Canadian basketball team to compete at World Games. I am one of more than 4.5 million athletes around the globe, and have heard so many similar stories. Being Special Olympics athletes restores our pride and dignity. Special Olympics also addresses critical health needs. Studies have shown that on average, men with intellectual disabilities die 13 years younger than men without, and women with intellectual disabilities die 20 years younger than women without. Special Olympics keeps us healthy by getting us active and participating in sport. Also, our coaches teach us about nutrition and health. Special Olympics also provides free health screening for athletes who have difficulty communicating with their doctor or accessing health care. At the 2015 World Summer Games, my Team Canada teammates and I played the Nigerian basketball team. The day before our game, the Nigerian basketball team went to the World Games Healthy Athlete Screening, where 7 of 10 members were given hearing aids for free, and got to hear clearly for the first time. The change in them was amazing. They were more excited, happy, and confident because their coach could vocally communicate with them. And they were emotional because they could hear the sounds of the basketball, the sounds of the whistle, and the cheering fans in the stands, sounds that we take for granted. Special Olympics is transferring more than just the athlete in their sport. Special Olympics is transforming their lives off the field. This year, research findings showed that nearly half of the adults in the US don't know a single person with an intellectual disability. And the 44% of Americans who don't have personal contact with intellectual disabilities are significantly less accepting and positive. Then there's the R word, proving that people with intellectual disabilities are still invisible to far too many people. People use it as a casual term or an insult. It was tweeted more than 9 million times last year, and it is deeply hurtful to me and my 4.5 million fellow athletes around the planet. People don't think it's insulting, but it is. As my fellow athlete and global messenger, John Franklin Stevens wrote in an open letter to a political pundit who used the R word as an insult. Come join us someday at Special Olympics. See if you walk away with your heart unchanged. This year, at the 2015 World Summer Games, people lined up for hours to get into the final night of powerlifting competition. So it was standing room only when my teammate Jackie Barrett, the Newfoundland Moose, deadlifted 655 pounds and lifted 611 pounds in the squat. Setting huge new records for Special Olympics. Jackie is a record holder among all powerlifters in Newfoundland, not just Special Olympics, all powerlifters. Jackie was a huge star in LA, and ESPN live tweeted his record-breaking lifts and were wowed by his performance. 50 years ago, few imagined individuals with intellectual disabilities could do anything like that. This year, 60,000 spectators filled the famous LA Memorial Coliseum to watch the opening ceremonies of World Games and cheer athletes from 165 countries around the world. Far from being hidden away, we were cheered and celebrated. Special Olympics teaches athletes to be confident and proud of themselves. Special Olympics teaches the world that people with intellectual disabilities deserve respect and inclusion. Now, I have dreams and achievements in my sport, great coaches, respect and dignity, better health, and I am pursuing a career as a personal trainer. I'm no longer hidden, bullied, and I am here doing a TED Talk. The world is a different place because of Special Olympics. But there is still farther to go. So the next time you see someone with an intellectual disability, I hope you will see their ability. The next time someone uses the R word near you, I hope you will tell them how much it hurts. I hope you will think about getting involved with Special Olympics. I would like to leave you with one final thought. Nelson Mandela said, "Sports has the power to change the world." Special Olympics is changing the world by transforming 4.5 million athletes and giving us a place to be confident, meet friends, not be judged, and get to feel like and be champions. Thank you very much.
So this is a guy who's been labelled as having what is known in Australia as intellectual impairment and either learning difficulty or learning disability in the UK. There's very little agreement on the label and there's a lot of confusion around the label and distinctions between intellectual impairment and learning difficulties like dyslexia, for example. So what we're talking about here is intellectual impairment. But there is a general agreement that it can be measured through IQ and social functionings. These psychological assessments are the tools used either to help people with intellectual impairment through helping guide the appropriate level of support to people so that they can live well, or it's used to categorize, incarcerate and punish people because of the way they are seen as too different from normal people, and so that normal people can be protected from these abnormal people. So two contrasting views. The reality is probably a bit of a mix of the two. Now, why the interpretation that psychological assessments are used to punish people? That sounds a bit harsh. Maybe it sounds a bit extreme, a bit of an extreme argument, but it is how it is felt for many people who have been given the label of intellectual impairment. Many were hospitalized, separated from their parents and families. Many were sterilized so they couldn't have children of their own, and some were never given the chance of life, as in the case of Down syndrome. So this takes us here to our second video. This is Karen Gaffney, who's been given the label of Down syndrome. She talks about education and the right to life. And this one is about 14 minutes long.
Good morning. You know, I survived Alcatraz, so this should be a piece of cake, right? I wonder what comes to mind when you think of our tomorrows, the tomorrows of people with Down syndrome. Some of you may be thinking, is there a tomorrow for people like us? And given what is happening in the world of prenatal testing, anyone would question that. Well, I'm here today not only to make a case for Down syndrome, but to spread the idea that all lives matter. I would like to start by telling you a story about my 5th grade teacher. It was her first year of teaching when I showed up in her class. She didn't know anything about Down syndrome, but that didn't matter because she knew I wanted to learn and she wanted to teach. We stayed in touch all these years, even after she got married and moved to Germany. She always made time for me when she came back to the States. A few years ago, I got a special letter from her. She told me she was pregnant and she needed my help. She needed my help because her baby would be born with Down syndrome. The diagnosis came very early in her pregnancy. She pushed back on any discussion of termination because she knew Down syndrome from a completely different perspective than her doctor did. She taught him about one of her 5th grade students, me. So, what is Down syndrome anyway? Well, let me take you back to your high school biology classes, where you learned about chromosomes. You have 23 pairs of chromosomes in every cell in your body, 46 total. Well, I have one more than you do. I have 47, and so does everyone else like me. It is not a disease. You can't catch it from anyone. It is just something that happens. And as of today, we really don't know why it happens. We learned about this extra chromosome only about 50 years ago. Our research team, led by Dr. Jerome Lejeune, made the discovery that all of us with Down syndrome rock an extra chromosome. Dr. Lejeune devoted his life to finding ways to improve the lives of those of us who were born with the extra chromosome. It was never his intention to have his discoveries lead to the tests that would prevent our lives. It was right around this time, halfway through the 20th century, that the practice of institutionalizing people like me shortly after birth was finally coming to an end, because families started pushing back on the practice. It still took a while for some healthcare professionals to catch on to that, though. I've heard my dad talk about the doctor discussing this option with him when I was born. The doctor predicted that I would be lucky to be able to tie my own shoes or write my own name. Well, he forgot to mention the part about the English Channel, though. After saying no to institutions, families were searching for ways to make life better for their children born with intellectual disabilities. Getting into their neighborhood schools wasn't an option at that time, so they fixed that. In the early 60s and 70s, we had parents, ordinary parents, and other friends and supporters they could enlist, knocking down doors, pulling out all stops, standing up for our rights, and getting legislation passed that allowed people like me into the classrooms of the 80s and 90s. For many of those parents, the parents a generation ahead of mine, it was too late for their own children. But they made it happen for my generation. They opened the doors. They opened the doors, and we walked right in. I guess you can say they created our tomorrows, and we owe them a great deal of thanks. So that brings us to today, the present. As we turn the corner into the 21st century, we have begun to see more and more young people with Down syndrome all over the country graduating from their high schools, some going on to higher education, learning employable job skills. Now, just so you know, it's far from perfect. Breakthroughs haven't come for everyone. We still have battles to fight for inclusion in too many classrooms around the country. Unemployment is still a huge hurdle for us. But those grassroots, family-driven organizations are hard at work, collaborating, lobbying, and driving for improvement. It is easy to see the progress we have made, ladies and gentlemen. You can pick any city or state in the US, search on the various Down syndrome support groups there, and read about some of the accomplishments I am talking about. You'll read about accomplished musicians and artists. You'll read about black belts in Taekwondo, golfers, dancers, models, actors, and public speakers, as well as good employees making significant contributions to their companies and communities. All role models for what can be done in spite of one extra chromosome. All doing our part to rewrite the story on Down syndrome. So, what is the issue? Well, as we turn the corner on the 21st century, something else was happening too. While we were all busy writing new chapters on Down syndrome, it seems the whole industry has grown up, and the race is on to find newer, faster ways to test for Down syndrome before birth. The problem is, without timely and accurate information about all our progress, if the test shows an extra chromosome, pregnancies are being terminated. Except for those, like my 5th grade teacher who say, I know a different Down syndrome. Or, wait a minute, let me learn more about this. We still have experts in the medical community advising families with old and outdated data. Data that reflects the past and ignores the present. Imagine that, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, reversing the damage of life in institutions, removing barriers to education, making inroads into a full and inclusive life for people like me. And we have those who say, we shouldn't even be born at all. You know, my 5th grade teacher named her baby Mia Rose. Mia is 8 years old now. She's going to her neighborhood school. She's speaking both English and German. But more importantly, Mia's a swimmer. Our world is better with Mia in it. I believe Down syndrome is a life worth saying yes to. It is a life worth saving. And thankfully, the same grassroots family movement that pulled us out of institutions and gave us the ability to live and learn and grow along with everyone else is leading the charge to do just that. Save our lives. The Global Down Syndrome Foundation was started about 10 years ago by a grandfather who didn't know anything at all about Down syndrome until his grandchild was born. He studied our past, he learned about our present, and he was troubled by what he saw. He gathered people around him to focus on our future. Their answer to the prenatal testing industry is the Linda Cernick Institute for Down syndrome, the first of its kind in the US, committed solely to research and medical care with the stated goal to eradicate the medical and cognitive ill effects caused by that extra chromosome. And then there's the Luline Foundation, yet another grassroots, parent-driven organization that is funding very targeted medical research that focuses on our learning problems, our speech problems, our memory problems, as well as the huge threat many of us face, and that is the early onset of Alzheimer's disease. These organizations are changing the playing field for those of us with Down syndrome, and they hold the keys to our future, just like the families of the 60s and 70s who said no to institutions and yes to education and inclusion. These organizations know what is possible for us in the future because of the incredible progress we are making now. You know, Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Well, you only have to look back about 50 years to see the proof of that for those of us with Down syndrome. Look how they changed our world and are still changing it. Can't you just imagine the future for people like me who are just starting out now? I know I can. Now, before I close, I have one request to make of all of you here and anyone watching this. Please, turn your back on the R word. Please eliminate it from your vocabulary. Yes, the R word. It is long overdue for extinction. You may think we don't understand that word, or you may think we can't hear it when it is said. But believe me when I tell you, we do understand. We can hear it, and it hurts. It has no place in our world. So help me on this one, please. Finally, I will leave you with this one idea. Every life has value. Every life matters, regardless of the number of chromosomes we have. Thank you.
So here we see a framing of the issues as a human rights issue. So just to add to that, here's another short video. This takes this human rights angle to intellectual impairment. This one is like the previous two videos from Canada, where the human rights movement for people with intellectual impairments is particularly strong. This is the final video I want to show you in this episode. The video is just shy of 4 minutes.
The Battle of Woodlands ranks as one of the great provincial conflicts of the year. Tempers were lost in the legislature, and sometimes more heat was generated than light. Leader of the attacking force, Gordon Dowdy.
The doors to public education were closed to our children. We raised money, set up our own schools, and hired teachers. We believed in the right of our children to go to school. Eventually, so did the government. We then fought for all kids to learn and grow together in our neighborhoods. Our family members belonged in community. Others said they belonged locked up in institutions. We fought for their freedom. We fought for their right to marry, to vote, to work. Rights that everyone should be born with, but that they never had, until 1969 when they were recognized by the UN. We lobbied not so that our voices would be heard, but so that people would listen to theirs. People began studying the issues. Values and practice were changing. And the acceptance of human rights violations was fading quickly. We started to close institutions. Our sons and daughters became advocates for themselves.
The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms finally recognized full citizenship status to people with developmental disabilities.
It may be important, most important thing we have ever done in our lives.
The People First movement called on us all to move beyond labels. We watched with excitement when the first Canadian with a disability, a woman from BC, addressed the UN General Assembly. We celebrated as BC became the first province to finally close the last of its institutions, and when it became the only jurisdiction in the world to safeguard decision-making rights for people with disabilities. We stood together as the walls of Woodlands came tumbling down, acknowledging the brutal truths of institutions. Our movement was started by a group of parents who worked tirelessly, fearlessly to create a better BC.
Now, psychology would see itself on the side of Matthew and Karen, but psychology has not always been on their side, and it might not feel to Matthew and Karen that psychology is on their side. The important question to ask is psychology on the right side of the civil rights movement when it comes to disability, and in particular, intellectual impairment? And perhaps that's something you'd like to talk about in our class meeting. So, come along to our class meeting. We'll be talking about these issues in class meeting week 6. So come along, share your views, and hear how your fellow classmates have responded to the material in this episode. So, I'll see you soon. Ta-da!